Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to talk about the difference between laser and inkjet printers. I'm a wedding invitation designer and I print a lot outsourced, and I have some videos on my favorite outsourced print shops, but I also print some things in-house. I think it's a good idea to have one laser printer and one inkjet printer in your toolkit, and I'll share exactly which printers I have, as well as some tips and tricks when you're using each of these or deciding which one to get. Both of my printers are technically out of production, but there's newer models you can get. I have the HP M452DW, looks like this, and you can get the HP 454, which is the newer version. I'm going to link that one in the description for you. I also have the Canon Inkjet Pro 100. You can get the 200 now, I believe, is the newest model. I'll link that in the description for you as well. I do have a blog post that I'll link in the description where I review the HP more specifically if you want to know some more information about it. One of the specific reasons I got it was to use a ghost white toner. I have another video on how that works and talk about it on that blog post as well. I personally started with inkjet and then added a laser printer, and that worked really well for me, but there might be some cases where you should start with a laser printer. Inkjet printers do basically what you think of as printing. It takes the ink and it sprays it onto the paper. And my inkjet printer, any of these like professional photo level printers, are going to have more than just one ink cartridge, more than just 4 ink cartridges. Mine has 8, and some of them even have more than that. So it separates the colors in a larger spectrum, and this makes it really good at handling photos. It can handle artwork where there's a lot of different colors, like if you're blending colors, if you're printing out paintings, if you're doing watercolor. An inkjet printer can handle those color variations very well. Something that it's not as good at is the crisp printing, so that's going to be better on a laser printer. An inkjet printer is going to feed the paper directly from the back in through the printer and then out the front. So all it has to do is bend a little, kind of a 90-degree angle, probably not even 90 degrees in most of them. So for this reason, it can handle thicker papers because all it has to do is kind of feed directly through the printer. An inkjet printer is also great for handmade paper because it's usually a little bit thicker and a little bit more textured, and an inkjet printer can handle that better than a laser printer can. I print vellum in-house a lot, and there's specific vellum that works for an inkjet printer and specific vellum that works for a laser printer. So neither one is really better or worse. You just have to have the right vellum paper with the right printer. The way that a laser printer works, on the other hand, is with toner instead of ink. And so it's going to use kind of an adhesive, and it's going to use heat. It's going to roll the paper around a cylindrical drum and apply the toner with heat, kind of like embossing. If you've ever done embossing with like the powder and then you melt it with heat, that's kind of what's happening in your laser printer. So because it has to roll the paper around a drum, most of the time it can't handle super thick papers. They're going to jam it up a little bit more. So for stationery designers, it's tough because a laser printer can often be faster. It can print text really crisply. And in some cases, you can get laser printers that handle colors really, really well. Mine handles them pretty well, but it just doesn't handle really thick paper. I like to use 120-pound paper or thicker for wedding invitation cards, and my printer is going to jam at anything really bigger than 100. You can get like one piece of 120 through, but you definitely couldn't put 100 pieces through. This is not to say that like no laser printer can handle this, but when we're talking about these models that you might have in-house that are in the several $100s as opposed to the several or many tens of thousands of dollars, in general, they're not going to be able to handle anything thicker than like 100, maybe 110, 120-pound paper. What's great about a laser printer, though, as I said, is it prints really crisply on text, and because of the way the toner adheres to the paper, it prints really well on like smooth papers. You can print transparencies. It handles vellum really well. Again, you just have to get the laser vellum, and it will handle metallic paper. If you try to print on metallic paper on your inkjet printer, it's going to wipe off because it can't adhere to that smooth surface very well. You can't print handmade paper in the laser printer, so you definitely want to use the inkjet printer for that because the laser printer uses a lot of heat and it can burn the paper. Also, with the paper being so textured and sometimes thicker, it's not going to handle well going around that drum. When it comes to envelopes, I have an entire envelope printing course that you can get on Skillshare or as part of my membership. I'll link in the description for you because there's a lot of nuances to printing envelopes, but you can print them on either an inkjet or a laser, but you have to think about them differently. So if you print them on a laser, you can't print them open flap because the adhesive can melt off and ruin the inside of your printer when there's heat involved. So you have to print them closed flap. So if you want the return address on the flap and the main address on the front, you'll actually have to run it through the printer twice. My laser printer is way, way, way faster than my inkjet, so I can often get this done quicker, but it does cause just like a little bit more room for error, a little bit more confusion. I just set up more print files, etc., and I'm loading them in there more than once as well, so it can take a little bit longer and be more effort in that regard. But my laser printer is so much faster than my inkjet that it usually still takes me less time. Another thing that bothers some people a lot about printing envelopes on a laser printer, and this can happen even when you get them printed like at a commercial print shop, is that with the heat and pressure, you sometimes get lines on here. I don't know if I can get it so you can see those, but sometimes you'll just get lines from the folds of the paper showing through on your envelopes. There are some settings you can adjust, and oftentimes once you put the invitations in, this will kind of work its way out. It doesn't really bother me too much because it can happen on even really fancy expensive printers, but it does bother some people a lot. So in that case, you might want to look at printing your envelopes on an inkjet printer. One benefit to printing them on an inkjet printer is you can print them open flap, so you can do the guest address and return address at the same time. You also could do an open flap design that goes over the flap and then kind of folds over, and that can be a really pretty design element on your envelopes. I'll tell you from my experience, I don't print a lot of metallic paper. I started with an inkjet and it was more well-rounded, and I think if I had to get rid of a printer, it'd be so hard, but I probably would get rid of the laser. If I had to start over with one, I probably would start with inkjet again because I think it's more well-rounded. However, my laser printer is so much faster and it prints text really crisply that I really try to only print text things like envelopes and things in-house, and I typically I'm going to use my laser printer. So I'm using my laser printer 9 times out of 10 and using my inkjet only like 1 time out of 10. I'm mostly using the inkjet when I have something really thick to print or I'm printing on handmade paper. So it's kind of this weird trade-off where I think for me, the inkjet can do more things, but it's not quite as good at half of those tasks. So half of those tasks I'm going to do on my laser printer. Another thing about my laser printer specifically, and also the newer model that I'm going to link for you, is that it has the ability to use a ghost ink toner cartridge. I have another video showing how this works, but it's basically a white toner cartridge. You replace the black toner cartridge in your printer with a white toner cartridge from the company Ghost, and it will print anything that was on your screen as black, it will print as white. You're basically tricking the printer into printing white ink. So this is really cool because white ink is really popular with wedding invitations, and I find that it's great for printing on darker envelopes and having that capability to print the white ink in-house. It's not the best, most opaque white ink, so sometimes I still do outsource that to better companies that have significantly more expensive printers and can do white ink a little bit better, or sometimes I'll do like a matte white foil if I want it to be really, really opaque on the paper. So it just depends a little bit, but I love that capability of having the white ink in-house, and that's something that you can't do on any inkjet printers. You can only do that on certain brands of laser printers, and you just need to look on the Ghost Toner website to see which printers are compatible. One final consideration for stationery designers when choosing a printer is for bar envelopes. These are tiny. They're 4.875 by 3.5 inches. We typically use these for reply cards. The thing is, a lot of printers cannot print this small. So if you're printing on the inkjet, for instance, what I have to do with every single envelope is open it, and I put a 5x7 piece of paper in here. It fits really snugly, and then I tell the printer I'm printing on a 5x7 piece of paper. So it doesn't think I'm printing on this small of a piece of paper, and it kind of works. It's still going to be crooked a little bit. My laser printer does handle the 4 bars pretty well, although I do mess up It's kind of crooked or weird on these a little bit more than a larger size, just because a lot of printers struggle with this really small size. So when you're picking out a printer, this is not really inkjet versus laser, but all the printers that I'm going to link below are recommended by other stationery designers. And I would say a big key differentiator is that all of them handle 4-bar envelopes well, because that is just like such an important feature for us as stationery designers. So overall, I think having a laser printer and an inkjet printer gives you a really well-rounded approach. If something doesn't work on one, you can try it on the other. If you forget that you're using really thick paper or larger paper or whatever, you have different options that you can use to get the job done. I mostly try to outsource everything if possible, and the only things I really print in-house are going to be handmade paper, which can only be on the inkjet, vellum paper, which can be on either. I just have to make sure I get the right type of paper with the right finish on it. Envelopes, which usually I'm going to do on the laser because it's so much faster. And then small jobs or samples or style shoots, things where I only need 1 or 2. And typically I'm going to migrate towards the laser on that. But if I want to print thicker paper or handmade paper, etc., then I'll use the inkjet. So check out the stationery referred printers below. These are very commonly used within stationery industry, and people love them, especially for envelopes, especially for the small envelopes. And let me know what questions you have about printing. I'd be happy to answer them. If you want to learn more specifically about envelope printing, because there's a lot of issues with it, check out our course, which is on Skillshare, or you can join our stationery school membership and access it there as well. Thanks, everyone.